The Kute Sikha is Chelek Yud Zayin Shmini Aleph, a deep Chassidus Sikha that is going to teach us the significance of the number 8 and the idea that 8 is transcendence or 8 is infinity. It has been spoken numerous times that the division of Sedris, the 53 Sedris of Torah, as agam in yeder Sedra zayin kama parshiyos in every Sedra. A Sedra would be Bereishis, Noach, Lech Lecha, or Vayikra, Tzav, Shemini. That's called a Sedra. Within each Sedra, there are many sections. The sections are called parshiyos, either from Rishon to Sheni and Sheni to Shlishi, or even sometimes shorter sections of the Torah, which are called parshiyos. So every Sedra has a number of parshiyos. Every parsha is its own concept, its own idea. Von deswegen, nevertheless, von dem Gufa, was alle Parshiyos einen in demselben Sedra, from the fact that all of these Parshiyos, regardless of what their respective topic is, from the fact that they are all included into the same Sedra, is a hichacha as es bin sei ein nekud as es bin sei ein nekudu mishutefes. This is a proof that there is one central theme that connects all of the individual sections. Und wie bald als der Teichen von jeder Sache wird herausgebracht und angedeiht in Shmoi asher yikru lebeloshon hakodesh. And since the theme, the content of everything is expressed and angedeiht, pointed out in its name that it is called in Lashon HaKodesh, and the Lashon HaKodesh name is not just a name of convenience, a random name chosen by people, but it actually reflects the inner theme of whatever is carrying that name, is move on, so it's understood as the Nakuda Hatichayna, that this central theme, welche is doin alle in Yonah von der Sedra, which connects all the aspects of the Sedra, is merumos in dem Namen von der Sedra, is alluded to in the name of the Sedra, varum the Shemes HaSedra is eine doch nemen al Torah, because the names of the Sedras are accepted names according to Torah. He mentions in the Ara 3 to see Lekut Sichas Chelek Hey, which in Lekut Sichas Chelek Hey, the Rebbe points out that the fact that these names, even though we don't necessarily know the source of them, but the fact that they have been accepted for thousands of years gives them a chazaka and gives them a permanence al pi Torah. And we could learn from a shtar, when you have to write a shtar, whether it's a ksuba or a get, that a name that a person has used for a number of times becomes his name or her name, becomes a chazaka. So to certainly names of Sedris that have been used by Yidden for over a few thousand years, certainly they have a sense of permanence according to Torah. So this name is going to tell us what is the central theme of this parsha, of the Sedra that connects all the parshiyos within the Sedra. Und auf al Pia has been gegeben Teichen Aprativ in jeder besondere Parsha ist der Chiluk zwischen der erster und der letzter Parsha von ein Sedra größer wie der Chiluk zwischen der erster Parsha von a Sedra und der letzter Parsha von der Sedra Shalafoneha. If you're talking about the specific content of a certain Parsha, then the end of the previous Parsha and beginning of this Parsha are closer than the beginning of this, I should say Sedra. The end of last Sedra and the beginning of this Sedra are closer than the beginning of this Sedra and the end of last Sedra. For example, in the end of Shemois, Moshe says, Lama harioisa lama zeh, and in Vayikra, Hashem answers, Vayikra lavram. So really, it's a question and answer. They're in two different Sedras, but they're connected to each other. What happens at the end of the Sedra is much less connected. So even though that when you're talking about the specific content of a certain parsha, the end of the Sedra, or the end of the previous Sedra, and the beginning of this Sedra is closer connected than the end of than the beginning and end of one Sedra. But Vibaldi Parshias Zainin Bismichus Einer zu dem Zweiten, because the end of last Sedra and beginning of this Sedra, the two sections are juxtaposed one to another. Und Smuchim is the Chalimud al pi Torah, and the juxtaposition of two things in Torah are used to learn something. For example, in the beginning of Parshas Batim, Rashi brings why are dinim connected to Mizbeach. The end of Yisro says that you shouldn't have steps to a Mizbeach, and then begins Parshas Mishpatim, and he explains to teach you that the Sanhedrin belong near the Mizbeach. Or in the end, in the beginning of Parshas Shlach, Rashi brings, why is Parshas Meraglim next to Miriam? Miriam is the end of Baal Loischa, and then comes the Meraglim, because Miriam was punished al Iskei Diba for Lashon Hara. And these Rishoyim, the Meraglim, they saw what happens when you speak Lashon Hara, and they didn't take a lesson from it. So we see how the Torah explains to us the connection between two parshas that are two sedras that are next to each other. So therefore, when you have the end of one sedra, the beginning of another sedra, they are closely connected, based as their zwischen der erster parsha und der letzter nein sedra. But if you look at the beginning and the end of the same sedra, then if around kama parshas of sikis b'neim, there are a number of parshas that separate them, and their topics might be totally unrelated. Is aber die Nekudim mishutafas anal for andavke bad di parshias afilu nitz muches bezayin in the selber sedra. But this underlying theme that connects the whole sedra, this is going to connect all of the parshias in one sedra and not the parsha in the previous sedra, even though it's very close to the beginning of the sedra. So very short. Every sedra is made up of a number of parshias. All the parshias within a sedra are connected to each other and alluded to in the name of the sedra, and sometimes they could be far from each other in space, in the order of how it's brought down in the Torah, and the beginning of one sedra could be closer to the end of another sedra, and yet everything in this specific sedra is connected to this one theme that's bringing them all together. Seif Beis is going to now bring it to Parsha Shmini. From them is move on. Now let's apply this to our sedra, the sedra known as Shmini. As trotzdem was mitzad echad hat die Escholas a sedra vayhi b'yom Shmini. Asach meshayches zum siyum a sedra shelofana. Despite the fact that the beginning of our sedra vayhi b'yom Shmini, the 8th day, is much closer connected to the end of the previous sedra. Vitzu der parsha zeisachaya, as much as it would be connected to the end of this week's sedra, which is going to teach us about the kosher and non-kosher animals. Versus beim Siyum from Sedra Shmini, which is at the end of the Sedra, the end of this Sedra. As it's understood literally, as the 8th day has to be behemshich, has to follow 7 days before it. The 8th day is following the idea of the 7 days of inauguration, of preparation. Shabesiyum from the Friedrich Sedra, which is at the end of the previous Sedra. But with Zeisachaya, with the 8th day, which was the dedication day of the Mishkan, and the parsha that speaks about kosher and non-kosher animals, they are seemingly totally unrelated. But since we just said that every sedra has its unique topic, unique theme that separates it, that it stands it out from all the other sedres, is verstandig, therefore it's understood as the parshas vayhi b'yom Shmini and Zeisachaya haben beide ein teuchen meyuchad was is nito in parshas kachas aren. So this tells me that the vayhi b'yom Shmini, which is the beginning of the sedra, and Zeisachaya, which is the end of the sedra, have one connected theme, that Kachas Aaron, which is the beginning of the parsha of the 7 days of preparation to the 8th day of Miluim, is not connected. Even though this is the 8th day of the 7th day, the 7 days are not connected to this theme, and Zeisachaya, the kosher and non-kosher animals, is connected to this theme. And this theme, the theme that connects Vayhi b'yom Shmini and the non-kosher and non-kosher animals, and of course everything else in the Sedra, is expressed in the name Shmini. So Seif Beis tells us that this idea that we just explained, that all the sedras, all the parshios in the sedra are connected, is something that we could see in Shmini, that even though it seems closer connected to the 7 days that preceded the 8th day, nevertheless, since the 8th day and the parsha of kosher and non-kosher animals are in the same sedra, and the 7 days are in a different sedra, there's going to be a closer connection, a theme that binds together Vayikra Yom HaShmini and Zoisachaya, the parsha about the kosher and non-kosher animals. So now let's figure that out. What is that theme going to be? In order to do that, we are going to speak about the name Shmini. Von dem, was in dem Namen von der Seder ist nicht angedeiht, als dort sich wegen Shmini la Miluim. In the name of the Seder, we don't call it Shmini la Miluim. We just call it Shmini. So there's no specification that we're talking about the 8th day of the 7 days of Miluim. Und afilu bechlal nit, afilu nit aseret sich wegen an 8. Tag bechlal. The name of the parsha, as it's known, is not known Yom HaShmini. It's known Shmini. It doesn't even talk about the 8th day. In other words, in the name. Warum die Seder heißt nicht Yom Shmini nor Shmini Stam. Is moving as dois negea their colors the inyan from Shmini. So it's understood that the theme of this week's parsha is going to be the general idea of the 8th, an achter. Und nicht der Pratisch die inyan from Miluim oder Yomim in welchen it is der achter, and the specific detail that it was the 8th day of the Miluim, that is not going to be relevant to the theme of the parsha, even though that is what it means, that it was the Yom HaShmini la Miluim. But nevertheless, since the name of the parsha is just Shmini, so just Shmini is going to be the theme of the parsha. In dem Chiluk zwischen der Sheiches zum Siyum HaSeder Shelafaneh und der Sheiches zu an ander parsha in der Seder Gufa, and what we explained in Siyuf Beis, that there's a difference between the connection between this Sedra and the previous Sedra, and 2 parshas within this Sedra, kumt ois as parshas kachas Adam von der Friedike Sedra, is benegeyad nekuda mishutefes bleiz akdama zu Shmini. The Kachas Aaron, which is somewhat connected to Shmini because it was the 7 days that preceded the Shmini. So their connection is only that Kachas Aaron is a precursor to the Shmini. Aber nicht aziz a tail von Shmini, but Kachas Aaron is not part of the 8th. It's the 7 that came before the 8th. Bedugma wie das ist bepashtos, as it was literally, as the Shivas Yimei HaMiluim zayin akdamet Tzima Shmini, that the 7 days of inauguration were a preparation, an introduction to the 8th day. Masha'enkin Zoisachaya, but Zoisachaya is a tel from Shmini Gufa. Since Zoisachaya, the parsha of kosher animals, is in the parsha of Shmini, therefore it's not going to be a connection to Shmini, to the Yom HaShmini, or something that's related to it, but it's going to be a part of Shmini because it's in the Seder of Shmini. So we have to understand, number one, what's the connection. So based on these 3 seifim, we're now going to try to explain, number one, what is the connection between Vayikra Yom HaShmini and Zoisachaya, which are seemingly 2 unrelated things. This is talking about the 8th day, the day of the dedication of the Mishkan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, in the Midbar, and Zoisachaya, which is the parsha of kosher animals and non-kosher animals. They are seemingly 2 unrelated ideas, but they have to be connected, so we have to figure out what's their connection. And number 2, we have to figure out how it connects with the name Shmini. And that's going to be the journey that we're about to go on in this Sikha. First, we're going to have to understand what Shmini is. What is the significance of the number 8? And then we're going to go from there. We're going to delve deeply to understand this theme of 8, al pi Chassidus. And then we'll come back at the end to Parsha Shmini. Wenn man es verstehen behaktim, so we'll understand this by first introducing was in dem Teichen von Misper Shmini gefindt man 2 Ktzavis. In the idea of the number 8, we find 2 extremes. Von ein Seite weist der Misper Shmini auf an Inyan, was ist movdul be'erech von die Zayin shekadmolei. The number 8 is removed from the preceding 7. Wie der Kleyaker is mevar, as the Kleyaker explains, as alle in Yonim von der Bria seine bemisper Zayin, that everything in creation is in the framework of the number 7, und der Misper Shmini is miyuchad elav yizbarach, and the number 8 is unique to the Eibishter, beyond, removed from creation. I just want to point out what the Kleyaker says. The Kleyaker comes and says that when it says by Yom HaShmini, some might touch Yom HaShmini la Miluim, that it was the 8th day of the Miluim. of the 7 days of preparation. So he says it can't be the 8th day of the Miluim, because, and then meaning to say that it was one of the days of Miluim, because it says in the pasuk Kishivas Yomim Yimaliyas Yedchem that the Miluim, the days of preparation, were 7 days, and therefore it has to be separate, says the Klayakar, from the other 7 days. And with this he explains that the number 7 represents mundane, and the number 8 represents holiness. And he says that Moshe often was praised with the word Oz, like it says Umay Oz Basi Ledaber Bishmecha, or Oz Yashir Moshe. Oz is an Aleph and a Zayin. The Aleph rides above the Zayin. The Zayin is the mundane, natural order of things, and the like the 7 days of creation, and the Aleph is the Eibishter that rides above the nature. And this is why Hashem revealed himself to the Yidden on this day, because the day of Shmini, Ki Mispar Zeh Miyuchad Elav Yisbarach, is special to Hashem. So this is following the idea that the number 8 is removed from the 7. Und der Pirush davon is Ki Mavur B'Kama Mekaymis. And what does this mean? As is explained in various places, as the Mispar Shiva is nit blois koilel di inyanim was in the Bria Gufa. The number 7 doesn't just include creation. Nor in dem wird nichlol euch der Eire Lekivas is sich mislabish in der Bria. The number 7 includes also the godly light that permeates the creation, just like the 7 days of creation includes Shabbos. Und Shmini is meramis auf dem Oir, was is hecher von islabshus in Welt. And Shmini, the number 8, this represents the light that is beyond coming down, being enclosed or permeated in worldliness. The Oir that's beyond Ishtalshlus. That's on one side. On one extreme, 8 is removed. It's miyuchad elav yisbarach. It's the Oir shalamayla meishtalshlus. Not even an Oir leki that's in Ishtalshlus. It's the Oir leki shalamayla meishtalshlus. Aber leidachisa. Weist der Teich von Wort Shmini Gufa achter. The fact that the word Shmini means the 8th. As das is nit kinyan b'fnei atzmi. This shows that it's not its own thing. It's something that is connected and follows the 7. You can't have a number 8 without having 7 before it. So it's not a separate thing. It's the 8th after the 7 that came before it. So on the one hand, the 8th is removed from the 7. On the other hand, it can only come after you have the 7. And this is the novelty, the accomplishment of Shmini. In dem here is where is expressed the completion, the completion of the Gili Elokus, the godly revelation. The Tachas HaKavana is, the ultimate goal is, as Eich der Oev, as is Hecher for the Shtalshlus. So nimshich werden begili in Welt. That even the light that is beyond the Shtalshlus, beyond the natural order, the infinite light, should be drawn down and revealed in the world, in the natural order of things. And das is menumas in Wort Shmini, which is alluded to, it was symbolized in the word Shmini as Eich das was is movdul and Hecher von der Bria, even that which is removed and sublime and removed from creation, from Chineshiva, from the 7 before Kanal B'Kliyaka, like the Kliyaka says that the 8th is unique and separated from the 7. So Zayin in an Eifen von Shmini, that even though it's removed from the 7, it should still be considered the 8th. It should still be connected to creation. So it's a very simple thing. On the one hand, Shmini means removed. On the other hand, Shmini means it's connected to the 7. That's the Gili Elokus, to take the removed sublime light and connect it to the 7, to creation. So far, so good. Seems simple. Und das ist echt der Biur, was der Kinder von Mashiach was einfach Shmini. This will explain to us, now that we understand that what 8 represents. 8 represents the fusion of the light of Hashem that is removed from the world, and the world, the way it is in its natural order of things, how we bring these two things together. So that's the unique idea of 8. This will now explain to us the connection between 8 and the coming of Mashiach, which is why the kinnur, the harp of Yemei Mashiach, will have 8 strings. The chiddush was that zich uftam Yemei Mashiach, the chiddush, the novelty, that will be achieved in the time of Mashiach is v'nigla kvei davaya v'ro kol basar. The kvei davaya, the glory of Hashem, will be revealed, and all flesh will see. As trotz dem was kvei davaya is bein arech echer fun dem bria, despite the fact that kvei davaya, the glory of Hashem, is infinitely higher than creation. Veter dan zayin begilui in anefim v'ro kol basar. Nevertheless, when Mashiach comes, it'll be in a revealed way, in a way that the flesh can see it. The physicality of this world can see it. In a literal seeing, in a literal vision of the physical flesh. Bis as der gilui b'chines kvei davaya vet zay nit b'derech chidish nor b'derech pshitus nelam hagashmi. So much so that the revelation of kvei davaya will not be a chidish, a novelty, but it'll be something that is normal, that is accepted. He's going to explain in the next 3 paragraphs what does it mean b'derech chidush and b'derech pshitus. And I'll just give you a quick intro. B'derech chidush means something that is unusual. So there are certain things that let's say a person can do. Person, when there's adrenaline, they can lift a car. So naturally speaking, a person can't lift a car. But something extraordinary happens, and they're able to do something that is unusual. Derech chidush, it's not who they are, it's not what they do, but they're able to do it in this one, extraordinary case. That's derech chidush. But derech pshitus is something that we do regularly. That this is who I am. I have the strength to do it. I do it on a regular basis. Derech pshitus. That's the difference between derech chidush and derech pshitus. And what he's going to say is that there's 2 ways to get the basar agashmi to see elokus. To see that the physical person should be able to experience and see godliness. One way is because godliness is infinite, so godliness can break the barrier of this world and reveal itself to the world. That's one way. But that doesn't affect the world. That is b'derech chidush, because the world remains the same world that is not capable of seeing godliness, and it's just that the infinite light of God broke through the barrier. So it's something that is an external thing that is impacting the world. The other way to do it would be to transform the world and give it the power to experience elokus, godliness, revelation, and then it's not a chiddush. Because once it became changed, once it became transformed, it now has the ability, the tools it needs to experience elokus. So re'iyah muchshis b'derech pshitus would mean that the world is changed in such a way that it now has the tools it needs to experience elokus, that it becomes normal, for the lack of a better word, becomes normal or accepted for the person, for the world to experience elokus. That's what he's going to say in the next 3 paragraphs. Das heißt, as das, was der Basar agashmi wird sein kvei davaya, wird sein mitzad die tchunus und teva von sein damos diker gashmis diker metzias. The fact that the basar agashmi, the flesh, the material world, will be able to see the kvei davaya, the glory of Hashem, is going to be because of the nature and tools of their then physical existence. Was demolt is there emisser ofen from derech pshitus, because only then is it truly an experience b'derech pshitus in a normal, acceptable way. B'shas der basar zet kvei davaya, nor mitzad dem was der kvei davaya is bligvul, if the physical world is experiencing godliness because the glory of Hashem is infinite. And therefore it has the power to come down to the lowest of worlds, and be seen by the physical basar. Das nimmt sich aber nicht mit Tzadit Chunesh ala Basar Gufa, but it's not coming because of the tools, the faculties of the actual flesh. Demolt is der Gilui Elokus in Welt, then the revelation in the world, afilu when das kommt in Riyah Muchshus, even if it's in a literal vision, in an Eifen von Chiddush, it's a novelty. It is an Eifdu and Haisafa in Olam, it is an external thing that is impacting the world. Because the fact that the basar is seeing the glory of Hashem is not part of its nature. It's something that's being forced upon it externally. The emes appears from B'derech Pshitis is the true meaning of B'derech Pshitis is as dos was der Bosser v'zen kvei davai. The fact that when Mashiach comes, the physicality will be able to see the glory of Hashem. That the zayin mitzad the tchunis und teva from the Bosser gufa, because of the nature of the Bosser itself, of the physicality itself. In the same way that today physical eyes can see physical things around them, so too the same, just like our eyes today can experience physical things around us, can see them, Baruch Hashem. So too when Mashiach comes, the eye will experience a lakus. But this is mitzad teva utchuna from the eni basar gufa. This is the nature and the power of the physical eyes. So therefore, when that's the taich v'nigla kvei davai v'ro kol basar, that when Mashiach comes, the kvei davai will be revealed not only to impose itself onto the world, but the world will be transformed, that it will be able to experience and see godliness as it sees anything else in its own natural form. And now we understand, now that we understand this transformation that occurs when Mashiach comes, that the experience of Elokus is coming from the nature of the world and not coming from the infinity of the Elokus. Now we understand the connection with the number 8. That the V'nigla Kvei Davai, which we just explained, expresses the two extremes of Shmeina. On the one hand, the Kvei Davai is Hecher and Muvdul B'Yerech from the Briyavas Misprezayin. The Kvei Davai, the glory of Hashem, is higher and removed from creation, which is represented in the number 7. Unafal pikein veter nisgale werden in der Welt in Aza Eifin as do zendem gilui vetzai mitzateva elam gufa. Nevertheless, it will be revealed in the world in such a way that the fact that the world can see it is part of the nature of the world. In other words, that achter vetzai tzazamen mit dizibin, the fusion of the 8 and the 7. The 8 represents the removed, but it's coming down into the world to become part of the 7, where you see the connection of 8 and 7. So that's why the kiner, the harp of Yemaisa Mashiach, is made up of Shmeina Nimin, because Shmeina, the number 8, represents the time of Mashiach, where there will be the bridging of the Shalamayla Meishtalshlus, the Kvei Davaya, the number Shmeina, the way it comes down into Bria, to be seen by Bria from the nature of Bria itself, which is the number 7. So far, everything is good. In other words, we explained the idea of Shmini, that Shmini has two extremes. On the one hand, it's removed from the 7. On the other hand, it's connected to the 7. And we explained that the whole idea of Shmini is to bring together the 7, the 8, and bring it down into the 7. We connected that with Yemaisa Mashiach, that in the time of Mashiach, the Gili Elokus will be in a way that the Eilam mitzad Atzmai could see Elokus, mitzad its own tools, so its own nature, and that is the ultimate expression of 8, when the 8, that which is removed from the world, connects itself with the world. So now we're going to have to understand this, because we just ascribed to Elam Haza an ability that seemingly does not fit well with the way we understand Elam Haza operates. And this is what he's going to ask in Eizvav, in Sivav. Medafer beverstehen. Das, was die Welt ist in an Eifen, was in ihr setzt sich nicht keine Lakus. The fact that the world is made in a way that you cannot see or experience godliness. You can't even truly see the Elokus that is tailored to creation. Again, before we use the term external, that when you do something that's not you, it's considered an external thing that's a chiddush, it's a novelty. here, the fact that a world cannot experience a lakus is not a novelty. It's not an external thing that's stopping it from seeing a lakus. Nor der Farvas die Welt is beschaffen geworden as Eifen. The world was created in this way. In other words, the whole definition of the world is that it should conceal ungodliness. Since the concealment of a lakus is part of the world in its core being, must be high time. Was the Nomen von jeder Sach bringt sein Teichen Ikri. Was is von Lashon Helam, and that's why the world is called Olam, which the name represents its true theme. And Olam comes from the word Helam, which means concealment. So, if the world is meant to be, by definition, a concealment, Tavi is Shaykh, as der Vero, called Basar, Lasar Lave. So, how is it possible that the Basar itself should see a lakus as a natural thing from its own abilities? Which is the exact opposite of the whole construct of the flesh of the world. In short, if the world by definition is concealment, how could you change it to experience revelation? If you're going to tell me that the revelation is coming from above, okay, so the world is concealment, and from above comes the revelation, so there's a revelation, it's a chiddush. But if you're saying that the world itself will be transformed, that it can experience gilui because of its own abilities, then it's not olam anymore. Then it's olam means concealment. How does a world, which by definition is concealment, how does it experience gilui? From its own power. And for this, we're going to go into Sif Zayin and Ches, and we're going to introduce something which L'cheira is the Rebbe's Chiddush here in the Sikha, to explain a passage in Tanya, Perek Lamed Zayin, which the Alter Rebbe says that the Gilui, when Mashiach comes, is Tolui b'Maaseinu v'Avodaseinu, Kol Zman Meshech HaGolus, and our work and our deeds throughout the duration of the time of Golus. And we're going to ask, why is Golus relevant here? Seemingly our actions, our mitzvahs, bring Gilui Ein Sof. Why is Golus relevant here? And by understanding how Golus becomes relevant, we'll understand how Olam will experience Gilui when Mashiach comes. Siv Zayin. Zog der Alter Rebbe. Now we're answering the question. We just explained that when Mashiach comes, the world is going to experience a lakus with its own abilities, with its own nature. And we asked, how is that possible? If world is helim, if world means concealment, how could concealment experience revelation? Zog der Alter Rebbe, as the Gilui in Tzad Baruch Hu Bizdelim Agashmi, that this revelation of the infinite light of Hashem, which will be in the physical world, which will take place when Mashiach comes, and in the era of Tchias HaMesim is Tolui b'Maseinu v'Avodaseinu Kol Zman Meshech HaGolus, is dependent on our actions and our work during the time of the duration of Golus. So why does the Alter Rebbe specify that it's specifically during the time of Golus? The fact that through our actions, through our deeds, we can accomplish a revelation of the Ein Sof, of the infinite light of Hashem. This comes because of the unique quality of mitzvahs. As the Alter Rebbe says right there in Tanya, as when a person does a mitzvah, a person draws down the revelation of the infinite light of Hashem from above down into this world, to permeate the physicality of this world. So therefore, when a Yid does a mitzvah, the mitzvah has the power to connect the Ein Sof in this world. How does it connect specifically to the time of Golus? One of the biurim that could be said in this, and in this next paragraph, is going to be the nekuda, the nutshell of the answer, and then in the Sifches and Tes, we're going to elaborate a little more. So if you don't chap the whole thing at the end of this paragraph, don't worry yet. We still have two more sifim that are going to elaborate on this in a very beautiful way. But this is the Nekuda Sabir. In order for the revelation of Mashiach, at the time of Mashiach, at Tchias HaMesim, that it should be felt, experienced by the nature of the world, is as dafke when the Amshacha as Elokus al de Mitzvahs. Was die Amshacha kumt lidei Gilui lasad lavai, is nicht wie hat zugegebene Sachen Welt. Will only be, like we explained previously, that the Amshachas Elokus cannot be an external thing. Das heißt, die Mitzvahs tun auf nur, als in Welt soll zukommen an Eireleki, aber die Welt Gufe verbleibt, wie sie ist, gewähnt früher mit Zadiris Havos, Eilum Lashon Helem. That the Mitzvahs will add a light to this world, but the world will remain in its previous state, which is concealment. That can't be. Nor, as the Amshacha durch der Mitzvah soll sein, and as Eifen, as die Macht über die Gas Beselem Haza. In order for the world to be able to experience a lakus when Mashiach comes, the mitzvah has to transform the world. The mitzvah by itself can bring light to the world, but it can't. But if it doesn't transform the world, then the world won't be able to experience that gilui of a nigla kvei davaya. V'rohu chol basa. Underfar is der Gilui di Yemesa Mashiach Tolib Masinu Vitzinu Kos Mamash Galus, and that's why the Gilui of Yemesa Mashiach is dependent on the time of Galus. Well, der Inyan was is doing mitzvahs. This ability the mitzvahs have to iber machen dem Elam Gufa, to transform, to change the world, and make it something, make it different, that it could experience Gilui. Is as beikir durch die mitzvahs was man it mekayim is Galus. This can happen primarily through the mitzvahs that are done in Golus. In other words, mitzvahs have the power to bring a lakus into the world. But mitzvahs in Golus have the power to change the world to the point that the world could experience a lakus on a whole new level when Mashiach comes. And this is what he's going to explain more at length in the next two seifim. First, we have to understand what's the power of mitzvahs. Why do mitzvahs have this power? Or how? That's what he's going to explain first, and then he's going to say why it's insufficient, the power of mitzvahs, and why you need goals. So he says, Sifches. Der Tam, was meisa mitzvahs bechlollos tun, auf azam shacha, was macht die mit dem Hus von Welt, the fact that mitzvahs, generally speaking, have the power to change the world, or to affect the world, to impact the world, is as follows. We know it says Beis Reishis, so the world was created for two Reishis. One Reishis is the Yidden, and the other Reishis is the Teira, is the Teira. As Yidden durch Teira mitzvah, the world was created, the purpose of the world was created, the Yidden. Through Teira mitzvahs, Zol and Uftan Gili Elokus and Welt should accomplish, should bring about a revelation of Elokus, of godliness into the world. Kumtois, as the Gilui Elokus was vert nimshich in Welt durch Yisrael and Teira, that the revelation of godliness, which is accomplished, which is drawn down through Yidden and Teira, is need kein inivos kumt al davar neis v'tzur metzias. Again, we're using this expression. Is not something external to the world. That the world is the world, and then comes from the side the Yidden and Teira mitzvahs, and they try to impact the world. No. Warum wie bald das der Gilui Elokus der Tzlova Teira is die Kavane und Tachlis von dem Weltgufe. Since the revelation of Elokus is part of the ultimate goal and purpose of creation, heißt es doch, als der Elam Gufe bepnimiyusei mont as soll sich durchführen in sein Tachlis. This means to say that the world, at least on a deeper level, demands that its purpose should be fulfilled, der Gilui Elokus in durch Teira mitzvahs von Eden, the revelation of Elokus into the world through the Yid. Just to explain this a little bit in different isis a little bit, when a human being creates something, builds something, his intent, his purpose of why he's building it is not part of the building. You can build a table, and why you want a table is not relevant to the actual table. Meaning to say that I could build a table for one reason, you could build a table for another reason, and both tables will look exactly the same. Because the intent of the table is not part of the table. Of course, you're not going to build a stender if you want a table. You have to know why you're building. But the purpose of the building and the building itself are two separate things. But by the Eibishter, where les asar ponui minei, everything is one. So the intent of something is part of the actual creation. When the Eibishter says Yehi Oir, the kavanah in Yehi Oir is part of the Yehi Oir. You can't separate the two things. They become one thing. So now, when the Eibishter created the world, and part of creating the world was for the purpose of Gilui Elokus by Yidden through Torah Mitzvahs, that becomes part of creation. Now, in parentheses, he says Bipnimiyusai, which means that ultimately the world is Hinyan is Helam. So when we see it superficially, the world is Helam. But beneath the surface, there is an aspect of creation that is actually built in, that it wants revelation. And from time to time, it will demand that revelation, because that's what it is. That's part of it. So now, we're learning a very new idea here. That when the Eibishter created the world was Taka Olam Miloshen Helam, and that's its primary purpose. But also, because built into the world is the Kavanah of Gilui Elokus, so that Bipnimiyusei, the world also has the ability, or the power, or the need, rather, the need for Gilui Elokus, and is part of creation. Das allein is aber nicht maspik. But this built-in a need is not enough for the world to experience revelation. In other words, the world is by definition concealment, but it also has a need for revelation. But that need for revelation is bipnimi yusay. It's concealed, and it's sometimes dormant, and sometimes it comes out. Comes out is not a good English word. Sometimes it expresses itself. So, but das allein is aber nicht maspik. But it's not good enough. The fact that there's a lying dormant need for revelation is not enough to transform the world. But it will be about as I get it from Elam is from Lashon Elam Canal, because since Elam world means concealment, and that by definition, it is in its core being is something that it does not experience its purpose for which it was created. On the contrary, by definition, it was created to be a concealment. Consequently, as benegeat zu der Metzius und Ihnen von Elam Gufa is the Amshachas to the Kushal der Mitzvahs yet zugegeben Azach. So now, when mitzvahs try to bring a Lakus into the world, it seems like an external thing, because it's either or. The need for revelation is bipnimi yusay, is dormant. Its real mitzias, its ultimate, the expression of its mitzias is helam. So if you're going to try to impose a gilui on this helam, it's going to be an external imposition that's not part of the world itself. Und auch die Scheile wird beworrend mit dem, was man sagt, dass das, was der Gilui de l'Asid tut sich auf durch Masenu v'Desenu, is Vayikra goes by Meshach Golus Kid L'Kamon. And this issue will be solved by Golus, by the fact that the Gilui is accomplished through Golus. Let's just make sure that we're keeping up. In Seif Zayin, in Sivov, he asked, how could Olam Miloshen Helam experience Gilui? So he started explaining to us like this, that the world was created for the purpose of Gilui Elokus. And therefore, the world inherently has a need for Gilui Elokus. That's part of it. But since its Etzem Mitzios is still Helam Vehester, so the Olam is concealing even on this Nekuda, even on this aspect that wants revelation. The concealment of the world is more powerful than that dormant need for revelation. And therefore, even though mitzvahs have the power to bring revelation because revelation is part of the creation of the world, but nevertheless, there's a concealment that's blocking it. And because of that, the impact that mitzvahs have will only be an external, novel impact and not an internal, natural impact. And in order to change it, to be a natural, internal impact, we need to have Ma'aseinu v'Deseinu, Kol Zman Meshech HaGolus, and that's what he's going to explain in Seif Tes. Says Mavur, in Chassidus become Mekem, it says when Chassidus, Bizman HaGolus is married, Keach HaMesiris Nefesh, maybe Bizman HaBayis, that during Golus, there is a... that during Golus, there is the Koyach HaMesiris Nefesh, the power of Mesiris Nefesh, of sacrifice, is greater than it was during the Zman HaBayis, during the time of Mashiach, of Beis HaMikdash. Because specifically the concealment, the darkness of Golus draws out this deep power of Mesiris Nefesh. Wie kommt es, als Helm soll von Gilui from Mesiris Nefesh? Helm und Gilui sind Dachafachim. How is it possible that concealment, Golus, should bring out revelation, which is the opposite of Helm, opposite of Golus? There are two paradoxical things. So you might answer that's how nature works. That darkness draws out light. Gashmi of them, as there is an analogy in the physical world, as an ekiv sheberegel is that the shlita saratzim from nefesh. Maybe this is a noish that the heel is more controlled by the head than the head. For example, it's easier to put your foot into hot water than it is to put your head into hot water. The foot is more obedient than the head is. Why? Because the foot has the chayis, the life force of the foot is concealed. The moyach is in the head. So what we see from over here is that the rotzen, the will of the person, is revealed more in a place where the moichin and the midos are hidden. So you're going to say, you're asking me how does Helm bring Gilui? That's how nature is. That Helm, the darkness, brings the more you're removed from the light, the more control you have, and the more ability you have to express. Davon does Gufa verstehen. This too must be understood. Why did the Eibusher create the world in a way that you need Helm to bring out Gilui? First question was, how does Helm reach Gilui? Are you going to say that it's a natural way? When it's dark, a person wants light. When the person is in the light, he doesn't want light so much. So why did the Eibusher create the world in such a way that you need to have darkness in order to bring light, or you need concealment in order to bring about revelation? Is the Asbara in depth. So here is the explanation. In order to fulfill the goal of making this world a dwelling place for Hashem, as the Weltguf is already nadira, that the world itself should become a dwelling place for Hashem, even from its own natural standpoint. Listen, follow. The Eibishter created the world in such a way as in that within the world itself it should reflect its purpose. In other words, within creation, you can already see the purpose of creation. And since the purpose of this world, the purpose of the fact that the world is created in a concealed way is so that it should bring to a greater revelation, that from the darkness itself should come a greater light. Der Fahrt ist die Welt eingestellt geworden bei Eifenkas. Therefore, the world is established in such a manner as Davke der Helm soll errichten von seiner Kli zu erhechern that the Helm, that the concealment itself should be the receptacle, should be the vehicle to the light. So just to explain this last paragraph is telling us like this. The world was created in a way that the Helm should lead to Gilui. That concealment should lead to revelation. Because whatever the Eibishter wants, he needs the ultimate purpose to be reflected in the creation itself. So if the purpose of creation is that Helm should lead to Gilui, then in the Helm itself, there's a built-in ability to reach Gilui. And that you need the Helm to get to the Gilui, you need the concealment to reach the revelation. So in our question was, doesn't the concealment contradict the revelation? That was our question initially. The answer is, no, it doesn't. Because the Eibishter created the world in a way that the concealment should not contradict the revelation. On the contrary, the concealment should lead to the revelation. So, and that we're going to see in a minute, that happens in Golus. In mitzvahs by themselves have the power to bring down a lakus. But mitzvahs is managolus, since the Helm is so strong, it has the power to trigger the Gilui that is triggered by Helm, which was built into creation, because you need to have that the ultimate goal of creation should be built into creation. We'll summarize again at the end of the Seif. Wie bald euch in Welt gufe wie sie ist nach Eilem Alaschen Helm. Es wird nicht gala, die Kavana was in ihr. Since in the world itself, the world as a concealment, spiegelt sich up as die Kavana von Helm Eilem gufe. This is reflecting the fact that the whole purpose of the revelation is to trigger a greater light. Der Riber is the Gilui Elokus Ba'elam durch Kiyama Mitzvahs verbunden mit dem Metzias von Weltkufa. Therefore, the revelation that happens through mitzvahs is not something that is added on as an external thing to creation, but it's part of creation, because this is how the Eibishter created the world. In other words, the Eibishter created the world with, number one, that the purpose is for Gilui Elokus by Yidden through Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, b'pnimiyas ha'olam, there is a need, a desire for revelation. That is covered up by the concealment. But that concealment has the power to trigger revelation as well. And during Golus, und das ist die Asbara von dem, was man sagt, dass der Gilui de Last ist, this is what it means, and the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the Gilui of Yemei Mashiach is dependent on our avodah during Golus. Weil mitzad der Mesiris Nefesh misman Golus wird in dem Helm von Eilam Gufa areis gebracht und ist Galle als ein Kavone ist der Gilui Elokus nimshach al Torah mitzvahs. The Mesiris Nefesh that is triggered by Golus has the power to bring out or to express the fact that its ultimate goal of the Helm was the Gilui Elokus. Und das ist die Sibbe, was die Amshachas Elokus, der Mitzvahs von Agolus is Peil BSS. This is why the mitzvahs, the Amshachas Elokus, the drawing down of Elokus that is done through mitzvahs during Golus, is Peil BSS, and is the Chmer Mislabish and the Metzias von Gas Miselam as a Gufa, is able to have a more of an impact and permeate stronger in the existence of the physical world. So much so that when Mashiach comes, it will be revealed as that it will be a natural thing that that the basar, the physical, could experience the kvei davai, the glory of Hashem, the revelation of godliness. So it just took us a little bit on a roundabout journey, but it taught a very, very important nakuda, and that is that the helim is b'shvil hagilui. Until we and this is it says in the source of this sicha, it says Shabbos Parashas Shmini, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, Tavshin Lamed Vav, Shabbos Parashas Achrei, and Maimer of Achrei Shabbos Tavshin Chafei. The Maimer of the Nocha, Tavshin Chafei, which is Muga, and printed in Sefer Amar Melukit, discusses this idea, the Helam B'Shvil Hagilui, at length, and it's always recommended to understand the Sikha even better, to learn the Maimer. But initially, we started out explaining that the purpose of the purpose Mashiach comes is that the basar should be able to experience a lakus on its own, as an internal, as a natural thing, not as a supernatural external thing. So we asked the question: how is it shaykh for olam, which is helim, concealment, to experience gilu? So we explained that there's two things. Number one, there's Ma'aseh mitzvahs. Ma'aseh mitzvahs has the power to bring down a lakus into this world, because the world was created with the kavana to have gilui lakus, and therefore, since on a deeper level the world was created with this intent, and this intent is part of creation, therefore the world has a yearning for revelation. But the concealment of the world is greater than that yearning. However, this concealment of the world that is greater than that yearning actually has a built-in caveat, has a built-in trigger for gilui, that when a person does a mitzvah, which has the power to draw down alakus, but he does it with mesiras nefesh, because the darkness of the world is so strong that it demands the person to bring out deeper kaiches in him, which he's able to do, because the whole purpose of the halim is for the gilui, is for the revelation. Therefore, the person doing a mitzvah in galus triggers this gilui, this yisrein ha'or, that is meant to come from the chayshech, and therefore binds, fuses together this world with the godliness much more than mitzvahs without zman hagalus. And so much so that by the time Mashiach comes, when there's the Vayikra Kvedavaya, the basar has been so transformed, side by the mitzvah and side by the helam of galus, which triggered a greater gilui, that the person is now able, that the world, the basar agasmi, is now able to experience a lakus as its own thing, mitzad its own nature, and not just as an external thing that is added on. So now we understand the idea of Shmeina. This whole discussion came in to explain Shmeina. What is Pshat Shmeina? Shmeina, or Shmini rather, is Pshat, that the thing that is removed from the world, number 8, connects to the 7, connects to the world in a way that it's b'derech pshitus, not b'derech chidush, that the world itself on its own could experience this lofty light. So now that we understand what Shmini means, Shmini is this messianic level of revelation where we can bridge together the light that's removed from the world and fuse it into the worldliness and the natural aspect of the world. Now we're going to come back to the parsha. Al pikol an alven verstehen dem Chiluk zwischen der Sheiches von Parshas Shmini zum Sima Sedre von Parshas Tzav Shelefoneo und der Sheiches von Parshas Zeisachai to the Parshas Shmini Gufa. Now we can explain the difference between the connection of Shmini to Tzav and the connection of Shmini to Zeisachai. In the Zayin Me'amilui Masretzach B'Siyim Parshas Tzav, in the 7 days of preparation, which is discussed in the end of Parshas Tzav, Aaron and his sons accomplished everything that could be accomplished by this lowest of worlds. Even that alakus that is done by Yisrusa Dilatata, that is able to come down from above and brought down into this physical world. Like we said in the beginning of the Sikha, that the Alaki that's in Bria is still part of Zion. So that was all done by Aaron Ubanov. They brought down any light that is possible to come down into this world. They accomplished. Aber das als is given via hachana und akdama zukfei davaya. This is only a preparation and a precursor to the glory of Hashem. To the Ashras Hashchina b'Mishkan b'Yemashmini lemiluim, to the dwelling of the Shechina in the Mishkan on the 8th day. Adozol zayin in an efen for Shmini, that it should be on a level of Shmini that says as b'chinis elokus, was moved to the gamri from the Bria. So then in verbunden eich mit den Yoni Abrish of Mispar zayin, that the godliness that is removed from creation should bind itself and connect itself with creation that is alluded to, that is represented in the number 7. So Take, Tzav and Shmini are connected because Tzav was a preparation for Shmini, but Tzav is only a preparation. In other words, what happens in Shmini, in Parashat Shmini, that happens on the 8th day. On those previous 7 days, that couldn't take place. Now, let's talk about Zeis HaChayim. In the Parsha of Zeis HaChayim was Retzich wegen Chayis ubehemis Tmeis, where it discusses non-kosher animals and animals that make a person tamei by touching them. Und wegen Isra Achilasam v'tumasam, and the prohibition to eat them or to touch them. Das is Shayich und is a chelik in Parsha Shmini Atzma. This is part of Shmini. The preparation for the Yom HaShmini, that's in a different Parsha. But the kosher and not kosher animals, that's in Shmini. Why? What's the connection? Der Zichuch von Elam Lashon Ha'elam was durch dem wer da Riz gebracht b'shleimus as ein Kavonis lib Gili Elokus. The refinement of the world, when you are able to express fully that the ultimate goal of the concealment is the revelation. Das heißt, Pchinas ha'er was is moved in ganzen me'abriya, to be able to reveal the light that is totally removed from creation. There's der Zichuch tut sich auf durch dem was is dort die Metzies und an es in des Mokim verhellen Yeser Chayis beimist meis v'chulu. This refinement of the world, we just explained at length that the world was created that the concealment is for the purpose of revelation. So how do you refine the world? When you create the world in a way that there's a space for the most tamedike thing, for the most concealment, animals that are tameh. Von deswegen is da der lahavdil ben atome ben atoir uben achaya necheles ben achaya sheles yachel. And nevertheless, there is a separation. You elevate, you remove the holy, the pure and the impure, the chaya that could be eaten and the chaya that can be eaten. Bedugmas by Azal, similar to what Chazal tell us. Al yemer odom efshi b'basar chazir. Person shouldn't say, I don't want chazir flesh. Ela efshi u'ma'ese avish b'shmaim, gods are alive, but I do want it. What should I do? My Father in heaven decreed that it's prohibited. When you say ich will nicht, I don't want it at all, you're not dealing with it. You're removing yourself from it. So you can't change it. You can't affect it. But when you say I want to eat it, but I'm not eating it because the Eibishter told me I'm not allowed to eat it, what you're doing is durch dem wer der Zichuch eich in der Helm. Was gitanot zu chayis beimist meis. Now you're elevating the concealment that made it possible for tummy to exist. In other words, very often we say that if a food is kosher, you eat it for the proper kavana, then you are elevating that food and it becomes a part of kedusha. But if you eat it for no reason at all, then it's a klippas noiga. But if something is treif, you're not allowed to eat it, then it's kosher v'osher and you can't elevate it. Here he's saying something else. Here he's saying something that's usher, and you serve Hashem by not eating it. What you're doing is you're taking the concealment that made it possible for something to be usher, and you're refining that concealment and triggering a gili oir that comes afterwards. The fact that you're addressing that something has to be separated from. I can't eat this. I'm acknowledging the helam, and I'm being mezachechet by not eating it, by not eating this food, or by not becoming tummy. And I'm utilizing the helam and turning it into a gilui. I'm being mezachich the helm. I'm refining the helm. Und wie der Medrash sagt, if in Pasuk Zeis HaBehema like nit nur mitzvos leYisrael ela letzarav ben hasabriyos, the Medrash says this teaching on Zeis HaBehema, on this parsha that's going to discuss the behemoths that could be eaten or can't be eaten. It says the mitzvahs were given to Yidden for the purpose of refining them. Sometimes siruf means to combine. Here siruf means refining silver. That the mitzvahs were given to the Yidden in order to refine them, refine creation. In other words, even mitzvahs that tell me I'm not allowed to eat something, even there's a refinement for creation. By recognizing that the Olam has things that are awesome, because there's klippa, there's concealment. And nevertheless, I stay away from it. This is a way that I am refining the Helim and refining the world. Und durch dem, was in dem Helim, spiegelt sich ab sein Kavanah v'tachlis, and through allowing that within this concealment, it can reflect its ultimate purpose. The Gilui Elokus, the revelation of Elokus. The Ratzon Asmi von Ha'idin, which is the true Ratzon of a Yid. Avish V'Shmaim Gazer Alai, that Hashem decreed upon me, a Yid wants the Gilui Elokus. Durch dem Niskala, which is becoming revealed through this Yidz, through this Helim, through staying away from this not kosher food. Dot tut uv dem Gilui von Shmini. This accomplishes the revelation of Shmini. As the Gilui Elokus was his hecher in ganzen verwelt, that this revelation that's totally removed from the world, where Nizgale in Shiva, it becomes revealed in the 7, as Vert Shmini becomes the 8th. Nizgale v'nisachid in the Brir Gufa Kinal Barucha, it becomes revealed and unified with creation itself, as explained at length. So now that we understand that the whole purpose of creation is for revelation, and therefore the Eibush, they're built into the concealment. The fact that concealment leads to revelation, actually it leads to a greater revelation, a greater light than we would have without the concealment. So when we perform mitzvahs in a place, in a time of concealment, which is galus, we trigger the gilui that is built into the halam, that is built into the concealment. This prepares us for the coming of Mashiach, where this will be realized completely, that the Kvei Davai will be seen by the Basar. And this is the Pshat of Shmini. That Shmini is the bridge between the light of above and the 7, that it becomes part of creation. And that's why, when discussing Parshas Tzav, the 7 days, the physical world, the light that is naturally or automatically part of the physical world, that's all a preparation. That's not part of Shmini. That's before Shmini. Then comes Shmini, we're talking about a light that is beyond creation, which was revealed on that day and will ultimately be revealed when Mashiach comes. And the connection to the non-kosher animals is because the non-kosher animals represent the Helim. And they represent the Helim that gives the person the power to trigger the Gilui. And that's the ultimate, and that's the connection with Shmini. Because the non-kosher animals, which are the Helim, are the Shiva, that leads to the Gilui that brings the light from above into the Shiva. Und leidem ist verstandig, was der Medrash sagt, dass die Chayes Tmeis ist das Moshe Ras am Alchayis B'Yisukan. It's a very interesting connection. The Medrash says that when the Eibishter taught Moshe Rabbeinu the non-kosher animals, Moshe actually saw in each animal the Malchias, the different nations that are going to exile the Yidden. For example, it says over there, Hagamol is Bavel. It says, Ashrei Sheyishalem Loch is Gemulech, which comes from the word of Gamol, which is said by Al-Nar is Bavel. Es Hashafon is Modai. Arneves is Yavon. It says that Talmai, who was a Melech Yavon, his mother's name was Arneves. And Chazir, first it says it's Paras, and then it says it's Edom, like we'll see in a moment. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he learns about the non-kosher animals, he's actually learning about the different Malchias, the different kingdoms that are going to exile the Yidden. dem cheshach and helen from the galus, as the Medrash over there explains individually the darkness and concealment of each galus. But now it makes beautiful sense. The non-kosher animals on galus, but in the uftu and giluf and zeisachaya gamer lahavdil gamer is the inyum tutzachov del galus. The same thing that's accomplished by the non-kosher animals is accomplished by galus. The galus is a darkness that leads to a light, and the non-kosher animals are a darkness that lead to a light. Was die am shachel von dem kumt durch beginnen lassen love, and the ultimate revelation will be lost at love kinish nimim, which is a time where the kinner, the harp, will have 8 strings. The number 8 will be revealed. And as Messiah Medrash, and as the Medrash over there in Vayikra Rabbi concludes with regards to Moshe Rasa Malchis V'Sukan, that the Chazir represents Edom. Why is it called the Chazir? It will return the crown to the rightful owner. Like it says in the pasuk, that we're going to go to judge Har Esav, which Esav is Edom, and then the Eibishter will be given back to Melucha. That then when Mashiach comes will be the ultimate Gilui, even on Esav, even on Golus, on Edom. Even on the Goliaths, they will experience the ultimate Gilui. So now that they explained Shmini, that the whole idea of Shmini, how connected to Zeisachaya, that the Zeisachaya is the Helam B'Shvil HaGilui, and the Gilui is Shmini. Now it makes sense what it's doing in this week's parsha, in Parsha Shmini, and how it connects. The whole idea of Shmini is the idea of the Gilui, of the Ershel Ma'alam Me'olam in Olam, and now this Medrash makes a lot of sense that the animals represent Golus because they do the same thing, and ultimately when Mashiach comes, all of these Goliyos, all of these Malchiyos will recognize that the Eibishter is Hoysel Hashem Amlucha, because then will be the ultimate Gilui of Elokus on Elam Hazeh, that even Elam Hazeh as Basar, with its own Teva and its own nature, will experience the Gilui Shalamayla.